Okay, so you can see here I've got the stair made now going from my lower level to the upper level with the handrails on there, and looking at the levels, I'm going to show you over here. I might change my scale to 1 to 50 just so that it's easier to read these measurements. And I might bring this one up so that you can see that as well. And so if you want to check those levels as well, then I'll leave that there for a minute. And so a really good tip I can give you there is that if you dimension those levels as well, it'll help you to work out your floor and your ceiling heights. So here I'm just going to dimension between at least these levels for the floors and then that upper ceiling. But at the moment, I don't have a level for the ceiling on the ground floor. Now, you don't have to make a level for that ceiling, but I just want to show you how to make one so that we can, partly so we can dimension it and work things out a little bit better. So a good way to make a new level is usually to use the level tool on the, on the ribbon. And now, sorry, that's not taking over your screen, but yeah, that's funny. Anyhow, so let's see if we can get it to come up. Full screen. Yeah, it's missing a few. I'll just see if I can grab those again. It's a bit temperamental, this software, anyhow. So, so here I've got a level that has a blue arrow. So just make sure you realise that. And then if I use the level tool, it'll make a new level in the same way. But what I'm going to do instead is select that level and copy it. So with the copy button, I'm going to click a base point and then come down 200, press enter, and it'll give me a new level. And I'll change that to, I'm going to keep the 1 there. I'm going to call it 1. Yeah, well, I don't want to put ceiling there, so I'm going to make that, so I'm just going to think about the order. So, actually, I'll put
1A, lower floor roof.
Yeah, that's, well, yeah, 1A is sensible, and then I'll just put, yeah, lower ceiling. Now, these are not good names generally for levels, so we'll maybe come up with some better names later. But yeah, the main thing here is that I've got those levels in the right order. So the 1A should keep it between 1 and 2, so that's fine. And then, again, we'll come up with some better names for the sheets. So now with this level selected, I'll just break that line so I can bring it down a little bit. So most important thing there that you can see is that these still have a blue arrow, but now this one's got a black arrow. So do you remember what that means? Exactly, that's right. Yep, so there's no floor plan view associated with that level. So that should make it clear that levels and views are different things. So you don't need to have a floor plan for every level. And in many cases, for example with this ceiling, you won't need a floor plan.
How do you know that it's going to just go to a floor plan and not have... How do you know it's going to be a floor plan or not? Does that make sense?
Yep, so if you copy a level, then it won't make a floor plan to go with it. Yep.
So if we've used the data line, will we have done that?
If we use the level button,
Level button?
yeah.
It would have given us...
Even though you can turn the option off here, so it's got the option to make a plan view, so you can turn that off. Exactly. Exactly. You can delete drawings or views from the project browser, and that won't affect the level. Yeah, so that's another option. So I've got that level for my ceiling, and notice that it's 200mm below the floor above. And if we look at the floor structure, you can see if I select this floor, it's a 150mm deep floor. That means I'll have 50mm left over for the ceiling, which is absolutely fine. We can have 38mm battens, and then the ceiling line would actually be 10mm, I know some people will say 13 because that's what plasterboard often is. Like the ceilings, it's 10. The only ceiling products you can get are 10 mil. If you see people using 13 mil plasterboard on ceilings, you can defect them and tell them to replace it because that's wrong. And yeah, 10 mil.
What did you say defective?
13.
13.
Yeah, it sags.
It's too heavy.
Yeah, it is. Yep, yep. So, yep, so that's why there are special types of plasterboard made for ceilings. So that will be 48 mil with the 38 mil batten and 10 mil lining. So I'm going to round that off to 50, and that should sit exactly on this level. So to make it, I'm going to go now, not to my floor plans, but to ceiling plans. And I'll go to lower floor, and you can see it doesn't look maybe the way you'd expect it to. It doesn't look right. So we've got issues there with these floors showing. They shouldn't be showing. And other things as well, just aren't showing correctly. So often, with ceiling plans especially, you'll need to adjust the view range. So over here in properties, you can see if I scroll down, we've got the option there for view range, and I'm going to click edit next to that. So that's quite standard. When you work with ceiling plans particularly, you definitely need to understand view range. And so here there's a really good option. If you click the show button, you get a diagram which explains what all of these different elements are. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you can see here that the one in the middle, number 2, is the cut plane. And so at the moment, it's at 2300, which is too high for this project. Normally that's a pretty good height, but because this building's quite low, and the ceilings definitely on the lower level are very low, and so we need the cut plane to be lower still. So a good height for this cut plane may be 1800. And I'm going to click apply, so you can see the change straight away. And there we are. So that's much better. I might bring it down just a little bit more, so maybe I'll miss that that part of the landing. So maybe we'll try 1600. Apply, and it's better still, but maybe a little bit lower, 1500. Let's go a tiny bit lower, 1400. I just want to miss that landing altogether. Oh no, it's going to get it because it's part of the stair, so it will get it. So that's okay, I'll live with it. So I'll go back to 1600. Go okay, and I can always hide that. Okay, so that's the first thing, but I'll go back to the view range just to show you a couple of other things. So the cut plane is often one of the most important things, but then you also need to look at the top. So I'll just change it to the one I want. Where is it in the list? It's not there. So hang on. Sorry, I'll just cancel that. Yeah, there's my level. Sorry, that's a bit weird. Lower floor. Let me choose. Oh, here it is. Oh no, lower floor. That's right. Where's the lower ceiling? That's a bit odd. I think there's an error in this. Okay, let's choose street level. This is not normally what you should have to do. Oh, it's because the cut plane. Yeah, I know what it is. Okay, so I'll just cancel that. So yeah, again, because this building is very low, you've got to be really careful. But you can see there that the lower ceiling is at 2600. Lower floor is 300, so it should be 2300. And then in the other view, it's dimension. Yep, that's right. Okay, so let's go back to lower floor. Get the view range again. That is really odd. Okay, well it's on the right setting anyway, but I wanted to show you that sometimes it will pick up that level, which it, for some reason doesn't want to show me. And that's where you'll sometimes have problems with lights. So with when you're working with the ceiling anyway, try to choose the level above the one that the ceiling's on. And in this case, that is upper floor. So that's the setting you should have, but again, just make sure and make sure it's not your level that you've made for a ceiling. And so with all of that set up, now I can finally make a ceiling. So you've got the ceiling tool on the architecture tab, just next to floor. And then there are two options. You've got automatic ceiling and sketch ceiling. Now because I've got a room there, you can see it's going to find that whole room, but notice how it's ignoring these walls. And that's because of the height you can see over here. So I'm going to change that height now to lower ceiling, the new level I've made. But then I'm going to set the height offset to 0 so that it sits exactly on that level. And now you can see, because I've lowered that level, it's finding both of those rooms. So I just want to pick both of those separately. I'm just going to click into that area and then click into this space. And that'll give me two ceilings. Now it's telling me they're not visible. So we're going to have to look at that. So to see them, I'll go to my section. And there you can see, this is one of those annoying things that happens when you use automatic ceilings. It sometimes puts it back to the level that you're drawing on. But over here in properties, I can simply change it to the one I wanted, which was lower ceiling. Even though I chose it before, it put it back. Yeah. No, yeah, it is basically. Yeah, it is pretty much, but that's the only way you can do it. Yeah. So here I'll go to wireframe so that I can see the ceiling. Yeah, so you've got the first one. The second one just went to the other level, and I'll just prove that to you. So I'll put this back to a lower floor, and you can see there's the ceiling that I made first, and it was just the second one that went to the wrong level. So it's really important that you check that in section. Oh, because that's how they'd be built. So typically ceilings sit inside walls. And so that's the construction, and it makes sense because the walls tend to support the floors, and then the ceiling framing is then projected down from the bottom of the floor. So over here though, I need to make a ceiling obviously, but this time it's got to go around this void area that I've made for my stairs. So again, using the ceiling tool, this time instead of leaving it on automatic ceiling, I'm going to change to sketch ceiling, which is probably the more important option. It's good when automatic ceiling works, but often it doesn't work, as you just saw, and often it won't give you the shape you want anyway. So with sketch ceiling, you can make any ceiling you like, a sketch ceiling, and then it's just like making a floor. So you've got all the same options as you do when you make a floor. So I can go to pick walls, and pick the inside of all these walls. And it's going to do a pretty good job joining them together, but you'll still sometimes need to use trim just to join the corners. And then to get this cut out, I could use pick lines, and normally I would, but I'm not going to here simply because I know that with 2018, it's actually got a little error, and your program might crash. You may have seen that happen. It comes up with fatal error when you use that tool sometimes. They fixed it. There's a patch they put out a couple of months ago, but it hasn't been installed on these computers, and it probably won't be because they often don't install the patches on these big systems. No, for anything. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, just be careful with that one. So it works sometimes, but if you're going to use it, just make sure you save the file before you test it out. And then if you find it creates an error, there are always other ways you can do the same thing. So instead of using pick lines, I'm just going to go to the line tool, and that will work almost as well. I can just click on these lines to trace over them, and that's going to give me the same thing as pick lines would. And now I can just continue on using trim to join those together. So that's the shape I want for my ceiling. But now I'm going to change the level to the correct one, lower ceiling. So I'm going to finish that, and then, as always, check it in section, so I know that my heights are right. So you can see the ceiling there sitting nicely below the floor. I'll go to thin lines just so that you can see it does overlap slightly. So what I might do is go to Edit Type. I've got the ceiling selected, so if I go to Edit Type, you can see then the thickness of that ceiling is 57 mil. So I'm just going to edit that and change it to have 10 mil lining and 40 mil structure. Just so it lines up exactly. It's only a little thing, but it will make things neater. And then another thing you can do to make it neater is join those together. So on the Modify tab, you can use the Join button, and then choose the two elements, the ceiling and then the floor. And they are joined. They've got a line there between them because they're different materials, but that's still okay. So again, I can choose the ceiling and then this wall over here, and it'll take that heavy line away as well. Same over here. So just joining all those things together makes it a whole lot neater. There we are. If you wanted to have a solid hatch, when you go back to coarse, that should just come up automatically. But notice it's coming up with the black hatch for my floor and my walls, but not the ceiling. So now if I select the ceiling and go to Edit Type, you'll see there's an option there for the coarse scale fill pattern. The colour's on black, but I'm going to change the pattern then to solid. Solid fill. And there we are. So now it reads as though it's all one element. And don't forget, while I'm at it, you can do that for roofs as well. Pull that coarse fill option, which is great for presentation drawings. And there we are. So see how much easier that section is to read now. And so that's got everything set up ready for my lighting. So that's really the most important thing, and really the only reason I'm showing you ceilings. If you didn't need to put lighting in, then it might be easier just to thicken your floor. If you're going to line that to create your ceilings, you could just extend the floor structure down rather than adding in a ceiling. But if you're going to place lights, then you need to have a ceiling object, or Revit won't recognise them. Okay, so now I'll go to, again, use the component tool. Remember, I'm in the lower floor ceiling plan. So again, I might just save the file quickly. And then again, using component, load family. And then I'll start with the lighting folder, in the default library, because they've added some good new lights to this. So lighting and then architectural internal. So you've got these downlights, but again, they've added a few, and I always have to look for them, so I'm not using them all the time. But where are they? The LED. That's not it. That's it. Downlight round LED. It's recessed. Yeah, so it's pretty good. So that one there, that's the new one. So you've got these two, downlight rectangle LED and downlight round LED. If you want them mounted on the surface, yeah, don't use the recessed ones, just use downlight spot or something. That's pretty good as well. Yeah. But I'm going to use this one for now, just downlight round LED. And so you can see it's not coming up correctly, it's not showing me that I can place this light. But if you have a look up on the ribbon, you can see that, well, the reason why is because it's got place on vertical place. So I'm going to change that to place on face. and now you can see it's coming up pretty well. So now this one isn't the one I thought. I thought this was the recessed one. It's not, but I'm going to place it anyway. And then I'll go back to low family and just get some other types of lights. Go back to lighting, architectural, internal. So there is a recessed one, downlight recessed can. Okay, so I'll just put a couple of these in. But then I might make a camera view just so you can see maybe what some of the issues are with some of these lights. So I'm just going to quickly make a camera view in that space so that I can then see how those lights are going to render. And that's a really useful tip that I'm giving you there. Try to test your lights before you put too many in. So make sure they're working before you copy in 100 of them. And I've seen people do it, and then obviously be very sad when they've got to do it all again. So just changing the view a little bit so I can definitely see those lights. Okay, so I'm going to bring up the render settings using the teapot down the bottom. And I'm going to leave the quality on draft and leave the resolution on screen. But I'm going to change the lighting scheme to interior artificial only. Save it. So if I click render, obviously it should render with the artificial lights only. It's actually doing a better job than I was expecting. So, yeah, that's right. So that's the temperature. Now, I'm going to delete these two lights, the LEDs, which I know are working. But I'm going to delete them and then just render again, because I'm pretty sure they're the only things giving light. Yes, they are. So even though it looked like the other lights were working as well, I know from experience that they weren't going to. And so here you can see it's showing these little these discs of light. That's the emitter or the diffuser, but we can't see the light itself, of course. So you need to work out the reason for that. And I know the reason is because of the ceiling, basically. So again, because of the nature of this building, it's a very low building, and we've had to make it fit into a very tight space. So in the section, I'll go to Fine, so it gets rid of the coarse fill, and then I'll go to Wireframe, and now my section needs to be just moved a little bit as well. So I'm just going to move that section line down because my lights are here, so that I can see my lights. I'll just move that section line down slightly and open up the view. And now you can see the lights. So you can see why, from that maybe, why you generally want to allow more than we have for your ceilings. If you have to, you can fit in quite a bit with a 200 floor and ceiling structure like we have, but you do need to make adjustments.
Then you can just have your ceiling on sloping windows?
Oh yes, sure. Yeah, you want to do a raked ceiling over here? Yeah, I'll show you that.
Yeah, well I'm doing it
Yeah.
the first half.
Over here, you mean? Or you'll be doing that. Oh, but I'll do it here. But yeah, it'll be the same as if you're doing it in one place. Yeah, I'll show you that. Okay, so here though, you can see the light is it's just fitting inside the floor, but it needs to be within the ceiling essentially. So in type types, I'm just going to go to here, edit type. I'm going to make it smaller as well. So here you can see it's got a big chunky diameter. These days, most recessed downlights will probably be smaller than that, and just to make them and definitely lower as well. Yeah. So we can change both of those and make them a bit less. So I'll make the diameter 90, but then most importantly the height, I'll bring that down to 50. Okay, so now you can see it fits in.
Do they really come that small?
Ah, yeah, oh yeah, yeah. So again, if I go to the perspective view and then just render again. Okay, so you can see it's doing the same thing. So I'm going to stop that. And then with that light selected, I'll go to Edit Family. And you can see then, well, we've still got a problem. It's because the emitter is above the light source. So I've got to select that, although the light source is above the fixture. Okay, so if we move that down, no, it's not going to let us. What are we going to do here? It's always a problem with this building because it's got such tight, limited ceiling space. Well, I've got another family that I can give you, but I do want to show you how you can get this one to work. You can definitely fix it, but it's got this recessing height. So make that 0. No, we don't want that. I'll get you the family that I've made. This one has been changed actually since the last time I made it. So, yeah, I'll close that. Okay, so I'm going to get a different family. If I select this light here, you can see I just go to Edit Type, Load, and then I'm going to go to the Revit library on the P drive, and then Lighting Fixtures, and then this one here, Downlight Recessed Can Glow. Now I'll need to change the diameter again, so I'll make that again 90, and then the height, I'll do it a bit more than 50. I'll make it 70. That should still be okay. Okay, so I'll just show you why I made it 70 in this section. So you can see here, this part is the only part that's above the ceiling. So the emitter should still be below that, but again, we're going to have a look at the family to make sure. Yeah. So with this one, I've changed it so that the light source is actually within the fixture, and I've done a few other things as well to make that light work a little bit better. Okay, so this one now, if we go into the perspective view and then do a test render, and you can see we've got light. Well, the first one's working, the other two, they're not. They might look like they're working, but they're not because I didn't change them to the new family. So I'll select those just using Control and change them to the new one. Enter again. There we are. No, they are. So you can see here they've got the light coming from there. Now, it may look dark. That's exposure. So just like in photography, your eyes or the camera need to adjust to let in more or less light, depending on the environment. So if I click Adjust Exposure there, to make it a little brighter. No, you shouldn't, no, because if we do sun artificial, then it'll just look like the sun's on and these lights are off. Yeah. So I'll just show you, so quickly. Right, so that's artificial. You can just see a bit of light from these, but not much. And the exposure setup would be different. Yeah, look, it's okay, but... Yeah, yeah. Yeah. It is brighter, but again, it's just like in photography. When you take a photo in a darker environment, you simply need to adjust the aperture accordingly. In other words, let more light in. And this is what your eyes do naturally, when you go from a dark to a light or a light to a dark environment, your pupils adjust to let in the right amount of light. Okay, so that's again using the exposure there. As I add more lights though, I'd need to come back and reduce the exposure. So going back to the ceiling plan now, I can then place more lights and be fairly sure they're going to work. So I'll just show you again in the Revit library on the P drive, we have lighting folder and lighting fixtures. So those two folders have a lot more than you get in the default library. There are lots of suspended lights, all sorts of different pendant lights. There's sconces as well, which are generally wall lights.
Do they all emit light?
Yeah, oh yeah, they do. Yeah. Okay, so here if I place a sconce, it should go onto the wall. Because it's a ceiling plan, it might be hard to see it in this view, so there it might be easier to go to a section, and I can see there that the sconces come in just fine. Floor lights, of course, probably easiest to place in a floor plan rather than a ceiling plan. So I can go back to low family, Revit library, lighting, and we've got all these different floor lamps. I don't like any of these, but I'll go for that one. Okay, so again, back into my perspective view, and before going too much further, I would definitely look at doing a test render just to see how they're working. And there they are, they're all emitting light. Now you can go forever with lighting. It's one of those things that you can spend a whole lifetime learning about. But maybe just to go over some of the most important properties, we've looked at a little bit of exposure value. And I know that you've all noticed that this is very warm, which means it's orange or yellow generally, which you can see here at the bottom. You can control with the white point setting, and when it's warmer, you'll get more of that orangey tint. When it's cooler, it puts essentially a blue tint or a filter. So if I take that to the left, you can see it's going to reduce that yellowy orange tone. Yeah. So yeah, we can even go all the way to, well, that's past neutral. That's getting towards actually being probably too cool. If I go this way, we'll start to see the blue, which is totally unrealistic, but again, that's an adjustment you can make. So often you want to just get it to neutral, but sometimes you want to go one side or the other for a certain effect. So maybe the final thing I'll show you is if you want to change the brightness of an individual light rather than globally adjusting the exposure, you can always select a light and then go to Edit Type. And then if you scroll down to the bottom, you've got all the lighting settings. So the colour here can also be controlled individually. And some lights will be too warm or too cool. So this light probably is too warm. I know it might seem back to front, but lower temperature is warmer, higher temperature is cooler. And so 2800 is quite a warm light. Neutral is around 5,000 to 6,000. So here you've got, see these two reference whites. They're both in the neutral range. D50 is basically neutral, up to about 6,000. Okay, so that's neutral. If you go higher than that, say for xenon, then it becomes cooler. So these are all preset lights based on real world lights, which gives you a good idea of the temperature of a lot of those real lights as well. But again, here I'll just go for a neutral, so it doesn't make my whole thing too orange. And then the more important setting maybe is the one above that. Now again, this does take a bit of experience to really understand it, but to start off with, again, if you just click on that option there, it's initial intensity. So ignore the initial bit. That's just, you know, the guys that work with this, they're very technical, and technically that is the correct way of describing it, but just think about it as an intensity. So if you click on that button there, it brings up these options for setting the intensity, which can be done either with 2 values or with 1. What do you think is going to be easier? 1, exactly. And if you've never done lighting before, don't try and put in an efficiency. You won't know how to use it. So start off with lumens or candelas. And that's how I learned to begin with. It took me, honestly, a couple of years of reading to really understand lux and how that works. So here, this one, LX, you have to use 2 values. And it's the same for the one that people try to use at first, because you might be familiar with that. You see wattage when you go and buy a light bulb, and you may think that that tells you the brightness, when in fact the wattage is the power consumption, and it doesn't tell you the brightness at all. So if you see a 100-watt bulb, it doesn't give you any indication of the brightness. And a 10-watt bulb could be the same brightness. And you would have seen that those new, more efficient, compact fluorescent bulbs tend to be much lower wattages than the old incandescent. And again, it's because they are more efficient, even though they end up being the same brightness. So don't use wattage, use either luminous intensity or luminous flux. And I'll start just by explaining luminous intensity. That's an easy one to relate to, because these units are candelas. So you've got an idea what a candela might represent? It's an old unit, exactly, it's a candle.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's the old imperial lighting unit, and a candela basically is the brightness of a single candle, even though candles did vary a huge amount, if you're going to go into all of that history. But yeah, basically it's a candle. So a lumen, which is that option above, a lumen is simply a metric unit that works in the same way as candelas. It's sometimes called a metric candle. So when you see LM, that's in lumens, and that's probably the most common lighting unit that's used nowadays. You even see it on a lot of light bulbs nowadays. It'll have the brightness in lumens. And if you want to learn about lighting, that's something you need to get familiar with. So I know from what I do with my own lighting that a range of between 500 and 2,000 is probably what I work with mostly. And around 1,000 is, I suppose, a medium sort of brightness. There's no absolute value for these things because, as I was saying before, your eyes adjust, cameras adjust with the aperture. So people and cameras that also work with the lighting, they can adjust to work with different lighting values. So you can go much higher or much lower, and people will still be able to see reasonably well. It's only if you go way too low or way too high that you'll have issues. So here, 1200 is actually a reasonable value, but I might take it down to maybe 800, just to make it a bit less bright. That was the floor lamp. So there should be a noticeable effect if I go and render again. You can see straight away it's cooler, and notice it's more blue than the other lights because it's cooler than they are, and it is less bright. So that's probably as much as I want to show you with lighting and ceilings, except that I'll point out here where you see the edges, just be aware of that. So if you don't leave a gap between if you do leave a gap between your floor and your ceiling, you'll see that at these voids. And that's why it's often a good idea to join them together if you can. Otherwise, do you know what you'd need to do if you do need to cover up that edge? Pretty much, yep. So in real life, that's something you'd always have to cover up the edge of your floor. And it's actually called a fascia. So it's a floor fascia, and that's an important thing that you need to know about. But as I was saying before, you don't always need to model it. So you don't need to model in all of the construction detail in Revit. If it's visible in one of your perspectives, then you may go to that level of detail. But if it's not, or even in this case where it's not that obvious that I don't have one, you can leave it out. But if you want to do it, if you need to do it, there is a tool for that. It's floor slab edge, and you can use that to add in floor fascias. But for now, it'll be good enough if you can get the ceilings close to to each other or close to your floors. So I'll come back to the ceilings though and show you how to do a raked ceiling, because that's an important thing, and a lot of people don't know how to do this, even guys who've used Revit for years. So the trick to doing a raked ceiling, well, firstly I'll show you the way that a lot of people do it. It's not the way I'm doing it, but just so you know. Okay, so firstly I'll just open up that I'll open this so you can see. So I've opened up the upper ceiling plan. Is that going to be a good view to work with my upper ceiling? No. Useless, in fact. It's a totally useless view. So that's what I wanted you to see first. So this is the level that sets the height effectively of the bottom of my ceiling, even though the roof's a little bit above it, but that effectively is where the bottom of my ceiling would be. But it's not a very good view to work with and to see my ceiling, because the view itself would be from up here. The cut plane is 1600 above that view. So the view that I need to work on this ceiling is actually the one coming from the level below, from the upper floor. So I'm not going to delete the upper ceiling level, it's a useful level, but I'm going to delete the upper ceiling plan. It's not a useful ceiling plane to have. So I'll delete that, and I'll go to the upper floor ceiling plan. And so then I'm going to check the view range, just like I did for the other plan, the other ceiling plan. So again, edit. So here it's cutting still probably too high. So I'll make that cut plane, I'll make it the same as the other one, 1600, because it is such a low building. And I'll leave it there for now. And you can see that now it's showing my windows because I'm cutting through at a lower level. And I want to show you a raked ceiling, but I also just want to quickly make a flat ceiling just so that you can see a bit more clearly some of those issues I was trying to show you before. So I'll make a ceiling and just very quickly change the level here to upper ceiling, and I'll place it inside this room. And you can see it's giving me the message telling me none of the elements that I've created are visible. In other words, the ceiling I've just made isn't visible in this view. That's what I was trying to show you with the lower plane. It was a bit hard because it's such a low building. So here you can see my ceiling is there, but it was telling me it's not visible, which means, and it would be the same as if it's a raked ceiling. We're going to rake the raked ceiling in a moment. Okay, so I've gone to upper floor, and so if I now try to place a light, a ceiling light, not a floor light, but I'll try to place a ceiling light. Yep, it's that one. It doesn't let me. Even though there's a ceiling there, because I can't see the ceiling in this view, it won't let me place a light there. So how do I get the ceiling to be visible in this view? Exactly. Change the view range. That's it. And so the reason it can't see my ceiling is because the top is the upper ceiling level. Even though the ceiling sits exactly on that level, it can't see it because it only sees up to that level. So we need to take it up higher. So I'm going to change the top to the level above, which is ridge. And we need to change the view depth to the same setting. And I'll click OK. And now, even though it doesn't look any different, if I go to component again, to place a light, straight away we can see it's going to let me place these lights, which tells me the ceiling's visible. So I'll put in a camera view there just to prove it. So there are the lights. Okay, so if I go back to the section, I'm going to delete that ceiling and I'll make a raked ceiling to follow the slope of that roof. And the raked ceiling is going to be visible in my ceiling plan as well because of the change that I've made to the view range. So back now to model in place, and I can choose ceilings for the category. Okay, and I'll call it raked ceiling. And I'm going to use extrusion to make it. and it's going to come up with this work plane dialog box asking me to choose a plane. Right, so I'm going to leave it on pick a plane and click OK. And then I'm going to choose my rear wall, the one that's behind this room here. And to get that, I can use tab. You can see they're moving the cursor around. We might find it eventually, but it will take some time. So instead, again, I'm going to use tab with my cursor maybe on the edge of this wall here. You'll see if I press tab, it'll cycle through. That one's not working, so I'll try the next edge. And there we are. So notice how it's showing me that rectangle, which is the whole of that wall. I'll just use tab again just so you can see I'm cycling through till I get that rectangle. So I'll click, and now I'll use, well, normally again I would use pick lines, but I'll stay on the line tool because of that error. So I'll just draw a line tracing over the roof, and then I'll offset that line maybe 50 mil, keep it small, and then just close it off. The flat ones? Oh, if you wanted to, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so just check that it's trimmed at the top. Yep. Okay, so that's the profile, or the shape of the ceiling in section. So I'll finish that. And now I need to go back to the upper floor ceiling plan to see the depth. So that line at the top, that's my ceiling. You can see when I select it. And I've got an arrow there, and I can simply use that now to stretch it, to take it from one side of the room to the other. Okay, so that's done. So I'll finish the model and then just show you again in the section view. So we can see there's the ceiling underneath the roof. And again, if I go back to hidden line and course, this unfortunately doesn't have a coarse fill option. So if you wanted to have a black fill, you'd have to put that in manually. And probably, I mean, you could change the material, but probably the easiest way would be to put in a filled region over the top and just set the colour to black. And so then going back to my upper floor ceiling plan, now I can place lights in this ceiling, but remember they're going to follow the slope of that, that ceiling. So using the component tool, if I put in one of the recessed lights, they'll work, and so I'll put in a couple, and then you can see just by looking at them, it's following the slope. And if we look at that in section, that'll be even clearer. Let's go to wireframe so that you can see them. Right, so there it is, following the slope. So recessed lights do work with ceilings like that, but often for those I'll use surface mounted lights. So there's some other good ones. So again, back to component, load family, and I'll just go to the lighting folder here, architectural internal, and we've got downlight spot, which is no, unfortunately. So those recessed lights, they have to follow the angle of the host, the ceiling. Yeah. But this one's surface mounted, so you can change the angle or for the direction. So here, I'll just place it, and you can see again, it is following the slope of the ceiling. But if I select it and use space, you can see it's going to rotate it 90 degrees. And then this particular light has a tilt built in, so we can change the angle that it faces the wall. So you can see there it's rotating it. And you can actually see it happening in the plan view there. It's pretty clever. And so again, I can change this one as well. So we should get these lights now angling towards the wall. So back into the section view, we'll see that as well. And so again, back into the perspective view. Now I'll just change the view around so we're looking towards those lights. So again, before putting too many in, it's a good idea to test it out with interior artificial only. Okay, so that's working, and then I can safely put a lot more in. And a mix of lights normally is good, so you don't want all down lights or all pendant lights. So here, again, I'll go to the Revit library on the P drive and get maybe some basic pendant lights that are going to give me a bit more diffuse light generally through the space. Have to play with that, but I'll put one in now so you can see the difference. So as well as getting the targeted light now, I should get some more uniform light throughout the rest of the space. Except, yeah, that's right, that one's not very bright. So I have to go and look at the brightness. So this spotlight probably is fairly bright. So I'll go back to the initial intensity. Oh, 3100, that's really bright. So I'll make that 1000. Or maybe even 950. And then the pendant light, it's probably not bright enough. No, it's a little bit brighter actually. Okay, so it's taking its time, but that's right, exactly, yeah. And so remember, the exposure still needs to be adjusted. So don't panic when you see that it's dark. Remember, you always need to adjust the exposure for every render. So again, as I bring this down, you can see we're going to get a lot more light. And as long as this doesn't become a big bright spot, once it becomes that, then you need to tone it down again. And then we can come back to that pendant light and start building up the brightness. So for this one, 1300 is not enough. So I'll go, I'll just take it up to 2300. Now that tells me it's not doing very much. Okay, so you can see here it's not really changing. So let's have a look at that particular light. It probably has some issues. Yes, it does. Okay, so this is yeah, this is not very well set up. It's the material actually. I'll just close that one. So I know actually this light, if we go and look at the material that it's using, called glass frosted. And, well, it is transparent, but maybe not enough. So make it more transparent. It's also self-illuminating, which is, well, very bright actually. So I'm going to tone that down. And, well, we'd have to maybe look at some other things. So back into the section. Yeah, so you can see this one actually is vertical, which is handy. So maybe that's the last thing I'll show you. If you do want the lights to remain that way, that's a setting in the family. And you can actually apply this to any lighting family. It's this one here. It's one of these settings that's sometimes hard to find, but there you've got the option to keep it always vertical. So in the... I think you can with those. It's just that they wouldn't look right because the recess wouldn't be right into the ceiling. Yeah. Here you can see even this one. It's the mounting's not right. Yeah.
Did you make the ceiling shading
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, so I might quickly put some downlights into there. Oh, and also one more light I want to show you, sorry. So we could play with this light and get it to work properly in the end, but there's a really useful light that you can use just to enhance the lighting in your spaces, and it's called Studio Light. So here we are, so you can see even in the default library, you'll always have that. Yeah. So it's just a floating ball of light. So I'll just place that roughly in the middle. And now I'll go back to my section view. So you can see it's floating there.
Just for the rendering.
It is, yeah. It's a bit of a cheat, but it's fine to use that. And so you can move that around. You generally want to keep it as far away as you can from things like walls and ceilings, so that it's not obvious that you've cheated and added an extra light. So then, because I see some people use it for all their lights, and it doesn't look very good when you use it like that. But when you use it to go with some real lights, it works really well. Just watch out though, because it is very bright to start with. So if we go to edit type here, and then look at the intensity, convert that to lumens, and you can see it's really bright. 7,000 is very high. So I'll take it down to 1,000, and then work up from there. And because it's an omnidirectional light, in other words, it's lighting evenly in all directions, it should still give a decent amount of light for the space. And I can see it there in the camera view, but it won't come up when it renders. Just the light, but not the light source. Still looks a bit dark actually, so let's stop that. So this is life with rendering. You do test renders all the time just to get it working, and then at the end you set the quality up, and leave it to go for a lot longer. Okay, so it's a slow process, but maybe just double that, and you'll see in some cases people go in increments of 10 times, I mean, but shouldn't need to go that far. Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. So even if I don't finish rendering, I can adjust the exposure even if it's an incomplete. And so again, if you test it out like that, when you've got few lights, it'll go much faster as well. So if you think it's time-consuming waiting for these renders, this is nothing. In the past, when we did test renders, they might have taken 5 or 10 minutes each, and so you had to be patient. But that's how it was with rendering. It's still faster than doing it by hand. And then the final renders would take days. Now I know they take hours at most. So it's much faster than it ever has been. But you still need to wait for a little bit. So you can see there, that's starting to get there, and again, maybe we could beef those studio lights up a bit, and so again, it's just trialing out. So 4,000, that's very bright, but in this case, for some reason, we've got to go a bit higher, so we'll try 6. And so maybe just as the last thing, you can put in different backgrounds. So there, for night images, you often want to put in a background image. The automatic backgrounds don't work that well, but you can easily put in backgrounds from the library that I've got on the P drive, go to Material Images, there's a Backgrounds folder, and, Background. So I can get one of these. And that does affect the lighting a little bit as well. Oh, so just using that style option. Yeah. So it is there in the background, it's just not showing because of the brightness. So if we go into there, I'll just get a brighter one, but it should come up pretty well normally. Yeah, I always spent too long on it, but it will come up eventually. I think it's also because I'm on low quality. Oh, no. So that's a different thing. I mean, it probably will come up. So if we go to Sun Artificial, go to the other extreme. Yeah. So there again, we could bring the exposure value up, which basically controls it, and then we may get the background coming through. No, it's still using the automatic thing. But this is won't go too far into these technical settings for backgrounds. They get a bit fiddly, but I'll show you later how you can use that transparent option, and then you can work with the backgrounds independently in Photoshop. So that's another option as well. But yeah, it's good to see that you can use an image, and they do often work pretty well. But again, I'll show you some tricks to make sure they come up later on. But again, avoid sun artificial at first. Artificial only is definitely better for testing, and you'd often need to experiment quite a bit to get your lights to work. But in the end, you would definitely get a lot brighter than that. And very, very last thing, back into the plan view, and of course you can copy lights. So with these lights done, I can easily copy them and rotate them, same as you do other things using the spacebar works, and they'll keep the same settings. And if you copy them, of course, at different angles, they'll follow the raking. So copying them this way, and then there we are. So the last thing I'll say there about the those windows looking out into the black sky. You will often see issues with this rendering engine when you have transparency. It does work most of the time, but again, it's when you've got those backgrounds. There are technical issues that maybe we'll look at later, but again, using Photoshop, you can manually control those things. But anyhow, once you get a basic setup, then you can obviously progress it further, but you want to get to that point where you've at least got lights working in a fairly controlled way in your renders, and then you can definitely progress it much further. So, unless you've got any questions about that, or no, not good. Oh, for yours, yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, exactly what I get up to. When you're talking about transparency, do I let you finish before you?
No, that's all right. Yeah.
When you talk about transparency, you're talking about fresh.
Oh, more these things like windows. Yeah.
Right, sorry.
Where if you see through glass, yes, I'll give you screens back too. Yeah, it's when you see through glass to the background. It's a very technical thing. It's because backgrounds are I'm going to say it. They're a system element in these 3D render programs.
Is it like on a different channel?
Pretty much, yeah, that's right, it is, yeah. So, so don't be put off when they don't, when they behave a bit unusually, but you can definitely make it work. Yeah, yeah, no, you've definitely got the right idea. It is all about channels, things like that essentially. Yeah.